Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the LiveWell Action Alliance podcast. I'm Chantel Taylor, and I'm gonna hand it over to my co-host to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Tanya Phillips.
And I'm Serah Wise. Welcome, everyone.
So for this wonderful episode, y'all, we have, as you may know from listening to previous episodes, we received a wonderful grant from the Georgia Coalition for Education Justice for to record 6 podcast episodes, and we typically would record at PCI, and we've had a lot of learning curves along the way. This particular episode was pre-recorded. However, we realized that there was no sound. So we had to improvise and make sure that we got this to you all because this is a very, very near and dear episode to us. So hence you see this layout for this particular episode is different from the rest, but we still rocking it and we're gonna make it do it with what it do like we always do. So with that said, in this particular episode, we are going to be talking about nutrition, specifically school nutrition, and we are going to be centering Sarah because Sarah is our nutrition connoisseur. She brought this initiative to the Early Childhood Education Community Action Team, and she has such a wealth of experience in gardening and being a chef, which I ain't had her cooking yet, but that's more to come. So we just want to take the time to really center Sarah and also center our work with the Nutrition Initiative. So with that said, I want to ask a quick icebreaker question to the group, and that would be, what was your favorite meal as a child? What was your favorite meal? And whoever wants to take it, go ahead.
I will go. My favorite meal as a child. Ooh, let's see. I'm gonna have to go with pizza. Like I think that's like a lot of kids' favorite meals. You know, and I was always a cheese pizza girl too. I loved cheese pizza, and I would always take the cheese off and eat the cheese first, and then I like for whatever reason I like the little sauce and just the bread, and I would eat that separately. So I was getting like an abundance of meal just off of one slice. And I'm originally from New Jersey, and so we would go over to this place called Frank's Pizzeria, and it was in like Kearney, New Jersey, and we would have a time that was like a family thing. I remember that very fond family memory for me. And I remember sitting there in those little cold, hard seats that they had in there. I remember the brick oven that they had in the back. Like it was just a beautiful experience and a beautiful memory for me. So yeah, pizza for sure.
Love that. Love that. And to me, New York, I'm sorry. I guess New Jersey's a part of that too, but best pizza, hands down. Hands down.
Yeah.
I would agree. Well, I haven't had Detroit pizza. I heard the pizza in Detroit goes crazy, but I have not had it. But of the pizza that I've had, New York is solid. Jersey is solid. My favorite childhood food was fried fish. I actually grew up in a vegetarian home. My parents didn't cook meat, but occasionally we would go to this place called Cameron's in the DMV, and we would get fried fish, like a fried fish meal. It would have your hush puppies, your French fries. That was my jam. Oh, that was my jam. Whenever I did anything good, if I was on the honor roll, when I won a kung fu competition, we going to Cameron's. Like that was my spot.
Yeah.
Food competition. I'm here for it. Okay. So fried fish, was it a particular kind of fish? Was it whiting, catfish? Like what was it?
Whiting, yeah. So
Yes.
we kosher, so yeah, it was either whiting or perch or something like that. But I believe it was whiting.
Girl, and what I'm sure it was Chris to perfection too. I'm getting hungry. I don't know why I asked this question, but anyway, so my favorite meal as a child growing up in a Caribbean household was oxtails. Like I used to murk ox with rice and peas and then with plantain, but I like my plantain, I guess it's ripe, like super soft, and also the oxtail has to have butter beans in it. Authentic oxtail with the butter beans and the rice and peas and the cabbage and the plantain. Yes, yes. So that was my favorite meal as a child. So thank you, ladies, for participating in that quick little icebreaker. So Sabra, let's get right into these questions that we have for you. So
Let's do it.
walk us through your journey. So I know that, well, I know, and the listeners are finding out now that you started in the classroom, correct? And then you kind of
Correct.
transition into culinary school. So can you walk us through that journey?
Yeah. So I went to undergrad. I graduated from Georgia State. I got my undergrad in education. I moved to DC and I was a high school math teacher for 4.5, going on 5 years before I needed a transition. Life was changing. And so I moved into garden science education. I work with an organization called Food Corps through the National Arboretum, and that's kind of where I got my footing in garden science and starting exploring that. After I had Psalm, my daughter, I started doing basically like meal prep in my area, which is like kind of how I first started serving food to people for money. I was doing like just selling meals to basically my neighbors in the Georgetown area of DC. But I liked it, and I was really concerned about returning to the classroom. And so from there, I decided to go to culinary school. And so I went to the CIA in Hyde Park in New York right before COVID, finished up through COVID, and then I came on down to Atlanta in 2021 when my baby was ready to start school. And so that's how we've arrived here.
So my part two to that question would be, what led you from the education piece into the culinary piece? Like, was it because I think I heard you say that you realized maybe the classroom was no longer suitable for you, and like, did you always have a passion for food and those kinds of things?
Definitely. So I'm the oldest girl in my family, so I grew up cooking. I've always cooked. I mentioned that I grew up in a kosher home, and so once a month that responsibility fell on me for 7 days. So I've been cooking since I was very little. And so which is how I kind of, when I was trying to figure out where am I going to turn to after I had Psalm, it was like the easiest thing to do. It was what I understood how to do. Um, Education is my first love. I knew that that's what I wanted to do coming out of school. I was gung ho for it. I found education to be a real labor of love, though. Like it took a lot out of me. Um, I taught high school math, and so at the time I was 22, and so the age difference between the students I was teaching and myself wasn't that far. But then there was also just like the power dynamics of it all. And so I really struggled to find mentorship during that time as a Black woman in this space, as a small Black woman in that space. Just navigating things was really difficult. Um, I was really interested in education policy, so I worked at a really transitioning charter school where we had a lot of students who needed interventions, accommodations, all of that. I was actually and accommodations teacher. I taught an integrated classroom. And so it was just a lot. It felt like a whole lot for me. And when it was time for me to become a mom, I didn't see how I could continue to do that and do momming the way that I wanted to. And so I needed to pivot. I knew I wanted to stay in education, but I wanted to kind of lean into this food thing that I knew I had under my belt. And so when the opportunity came to get into gardening, and it actually started out as I was going to build school gardens and then teach cooking classes, which is how like my experience kind of ties into it. I had no garden experience, but I knew how to cook and I knew how to teach. And so I went to the National Arboretum and they taught me gardening, from horticulture to agriculture, and then I went out into the schools. And so that's kind of been the flow of it. I've always cooked. It's a second love. It's a second language of mine. It's kind of something I fall into naturally, but it's been a process to understand where it actually fits in my life and all the other things that I'm interested in.
Makes sense. Thank you for answering that. So, and it made me think about so many things when you were speaking, like you mentioned the garden science piece. And so, in essence, that was, what did that was like an opportunity for you to go into, was it elementary schools or middle schools to build community or school gardens rather? Or, okay, okay,
Yeah, so I actually started in elementary schools. Yep.
okay.
Once COVID hit, we were all over. It was like food distribution across, all grades, but I started in elementary schools. Yep.
Okay, so how did that experience impact your knowledge and connection to food access and also education as it relates to, food and nutrition?
Um, I hadn't really considered the way children eat, right? So as a chef and as a person who is like making meals for people to sell, I hadn't really considered what motivates children to eat, what do children like to eat, how you get your children to eat. And so when I came into this place, it was really interesting, like introducing children to vegetables. Like, this is what I grew, and kind of getting that first of like, I don't want that, or I'm not willing to try that. And so I kind of understood that our children weren't being exposed to a lot of these things. When we talk about, I remember one of the first things that I grew, because I started in the summer, and I was working at Center City Public Charter School in Washington, D.C., and the gardener who was there before had grown something called ground cherries. And ground cherries grow in these small little packets, like they're covered in little, it almost looks like a parchment paper packet. They're these little berries, and they grow up under the shrubbery. And so I'm cleaning it back. I'm cleaning things back. And the my coach, like the person who's leading me through this, he's like, these are ground cherries. And I'm like, what? What are these? And he's like, take them to the kids. And so I gather them all up, and I'm like, y'all, look at what. And I was so fascinated by the fact that each cherry is really like it's enwrapped in its own little enclosure. So I'm like, y'all, look at this. So we're like going through it, and they're like, but I'm not gonna eat that. Did you wash that? Where did you get that? Like there was a true disconnect, and like that's cool, but is it going in my mouth? No. And so I understood that our children haven't necessarily been exposed to a lot of things, and even things that they have access to, there's sometimes a boundary with what they're willing to try. And that got me going. I was like, okay, so what is this? And so I really got interested in texture. I really got interested in how often are we giving children raw fruits and vegetables so that their palates are experienced with that and can appreciate that. How often do our children eat raw fruits and vegetables? That led me down this path. And then once COVID hit, I really understood the problems that we were with in DC around food access. SNAP was everywhere. There was just like it was almost like DC public schools was using the schools as distribution centers for produce on a regular basis. And they allowed Food Corps, the organization I was working with, to bring in produce. And I was watching parents come in, they were getting all the packaged food and leaving produce, kale, broccoli, salad greens, for all of these fresh fruits and vegetables. It's just like, and then there's a question of like, I don't have a refrigerator. I don't have any place to store these things, or I don't have a stove. I need something I can cook in the microwave. And so I began to understand our food story as it's a much larger thing. We're talking about what children will and won't eat, what textures children are and haven't been exposed to, and then what can we actually prepare within our homes based on our living conditions. And so all of those things kind of took me down a path. I was like, oh, I gotta kind of get into this. And so when I moved to Jersey during COVID and was close to the CIA, I was like, I think this is the approach I want to take. So the CIA actually has a program specializing in plant-based food. And so that's the curriculum that I followed. I really wanted to understand how to make fruits and vegetables palatable for children. I really wanted to understand how to introduce new fruits and vegetables, and also heirloom fruits and vegetables, things that we've lost culturally. How do we bring those things back into our communities?
Heirlooms. I'm here for it. Okay.
Okay, so now yes, that was first of all that was fantastic, and I love that you decided and saw the need there. And really kind of got into why you wanted to kind of transition into whatever was best suitable for the community. You saw the need, and you're like, I got to fill this need. I got to help with this.
Yeah.
Um, what So, what role do you believe that school gardens can play then in improving student health and then learning, helping the children understand, helping them with that texture part, that eating, introducing more fruits and vegetables? Like, what role can the school actually help and play in improving that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, because I think that ideally when we think about our schools, we think of them as safe spaces. And so when we think about school gardens, it's an extension of that safety. And so I know at like the school that my daughter goes to, there's a sensory garden where there's an intentional movement placed to create sensory activities for children who are neurodivergent, who are overstimulated. It's a place where you can go and kind of reset. And so that's the mental health part. When we think about how do we allow school gardens to be an extension of the safety that the larger school is supposed to represent. Um, but then when we talk about what's actually growing in the garden, I think that food is, again, it's a comfort thing. Children will taste what you give them if they trust you, if they trust that you are giving them something that won't hurt them, if they trust that you know what's good. Children will also eat what they grow. So if you walk a child through the process of putting the seed in the ground, watering it, they will see the process through to tasting it. Now, whether they will like it is a different conversation, but they're going to see it through. And so that was a really big part of it for me, was like I understood that I could just introduce you to things. I could, in 2 years, I know that it takes asparagus 2 years to come to harvest. In 2 years, I can work on you and I can get you to try some asparagus. I'm not going to say you're going to like it, but you will leave saying, I've had asparagus before. And I feel like so many of our children just have not been exposed to so many things. There were so many, they had never had Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, like things that are just kind of that we just kind of know, and that we take for granted. They just kind of look at it, that's white broccoli. I ain't eating that. I'm good, And it's like, how do we really work through this when some of us don't come from communities that where these are culturally appropriate or are culturally available, or we just lack access when it comes to resources. So for me, it's really a thing of safety. I really look at food as like spiritual safety. I think that when we're feeding our children and teaching our children about food, we're communicating something about survival. And so there's a real need to instill a trust there. And I think that's the biggest part. And when we look at school gardens as a larger entity, trust is a really big part of it. The child understanding that this is a place that I can go to be nourished, but this is a place that I can go to be safe. This is a place that I can go to recalibrate, and really reconnecting ourselves with nature and being outside.
I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. It really is. Okay, so hmm, how did working with co-ops influence your understanding of community food systems?
This is a good one. So, my mother actually used to run a co-op when I was a little girl. She ran a co-op off of our carport. So we didn't have a garage. We had like a covered carport. And my mother, like I said, I mentioned, I grew up vegetarian, and there was a community of us that were largely vegetarian. So my mother would buy 2 cases of tofu. She would buy organic broccoli, organic scallions, organic um, mung bean sprouts, and just kind of like sourcing all the organic that she could. But it wasn't just her, it was a community of 6 other mamas who were also eating the same way. The food would be delivered to my mother's house, and I watched these women sparse, like pair it out to 6 families, right? So we're practicing Ujamaa, which is cooperative economics, you know what I'm saying? And understanding how when we pool our things together, it goes so much further. So for a long time, when I thought about food access, it is a communal thing. From a large part of my childhood, it wasn't going to the grocery store. The food was like on the porch. It was like we going to such and such's house. And so I think that that's a really big part of, I think community is a really big part of food and how we understand it. Years later, when my family moved to Atlanta, my family was economically unsettled for several years, and we were really dependent on food co-ops here. There was a place called Heaven's Grocery that my family went to every Friday. They would get a truck from Whole Foods that was basically their excess. There would be organic biscuits, all of these things that my mother would buy that during this season of my life we could not afford. We would take home cases of organic food, but also while we were there, while the mamas were sorting, we, the children, were having a spaghetti dinner every Friday. And so I understood food as something to be shared. I understood hunger as a collective goal to fight. It's not, these aren't small things. This is a collective thing that we all need to be taking on. And I understood that as a child, I have a place in that. So it wasn't just like I was there to eat. Like I was definitely weighing produce. I was definitely like unload that truck. It was like you're a part of this. And so I think that that really grounded me in the food system early, and I've just always been very comfortable in it. And it's something that I want other children to have. I want children to feel comfortable around abundance of food, and that's not something I see a lot.
Mhm. Okay, okay. Yeah, I love that. That group economics, that sharing, and making sure that people are fed, period, right? All your people are fed. I love that. That's community. That's
Yeah.
community.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Um, so what What led you to culinary school in general? How was that training influenced, and how has that training, excuse me, influenced your work with children and families? I'd love to know the story behind
Um, I was hesitant to go to culinary school because I had already gone to school. And I come from a family where trades aren't necessarily respected in that way. And so, having already gotten a 4-year degree, there was this energy of like, for what, you know? Um, I really felt like I needed to understand how to do it on the highest level. I have this idea that sometimes when we come to do community work, um, you come as you are, and I love that. But it's really valuable when we come as we are, and what we are is the best, right? When we're bringing the highest information, when we've done the work, when we've gone to the places, had the conversations, gotten the information, and bringing it back. And that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to understand how to I wanted to understand how to plate gourmet plant-based dishes for children. That's not something that I understood. I understood family meals. I understood buffets. I understood that. I wanted to understand how to elevate vegetables. I wanted to understand how to ferment, how to like what is all of this, and how do we really do this in a changing world, um, in a world where all we can really depend on is what you could grow outside. You know what I'm saying? It's like how vast, how far can I take this? And that was my motivation. That's where I was stuck. That's what got me there. The training was a lot. It was a lot. My child was 4 at the time. I was living with extended family. It was a very interesting time, but it was a time for me to really just dig my head in and get into it. Um, it was a 16-month program. Um, we did gastronomy. I did preservation and fermentation. I got into plating, but I also really got those practical skills of like safe serve certification and like proper storage and these things that you just can't really learn unless either you're going to go and spend 5 years working in someone's restaurant. And so I felt like I was able to go and get that immediately. And then
that.
from there, when I came down here, I went and worked for an organization or a company called Pure Provisions Kitchen. It's up in DeKalb County. It's a woman-owned company, and her entire business model is around providing gluten-free, vegan, and nut-free meals to students in private schools up there. So we would build a vegan menu, and then it was delivered across 8 campuses. So we were making 800 meals a day for
Wow.
children who are vegan, who are nut-friendly. This is a service that isn't even available on this side of town, where I'm commuting 45 minutes to, and this is just a thing. And so just understanding how certain cultures are a bit further along in their demands around food, specifically for their children. I wanted to just deeply understand that. I wanted to understand how to do it on the highest level so that I could bring it to where my people are, and help us be able to demand that. You know, it's not it's there is it, you want to be able to offer it, but I want my people to demand it. I want my people to want that, to know that they have the ability to ask for that, and so that's my goal.
And that's a perfect segue into my next question because I would like to know from your perspective, what can schools and community partners do to be more inclusive of culturally relevant meals, of dietary appropriate meals, because I'm hearing, of course, when you said private school, I was like, it makes sense. Because I'm like, what about the kids who come to school in public school and have these very same allergens or have these very same, maybe religious backgrounds or even not even religious, but they're just vegan or vegetarian, where are these accommodations? So back to my questions, what do you think schools and community partners can do to be more inclusive in that way?
Um, I think that the first answer is cultural inclusivity. When we think about education, we have to understand that ev- every child is coming from a different place and has a different experience. And so, just like with all education and how we modify to make it make sense for them, our food needs to be the same way. Um, I also think that our schools need to prioritize the feeding of our children. And so, in a society where the test scores are low and the funding is low, the priority for feeding the children is even lower. And so this is how we have situations where we're just straight funded off of the federal system. We don't really require any state funding. We're going to bring in, the most generic brands, and we're going to bring in the base level meals because the goal is just to make sure that these children have something in their bellies. That's the bare minimum. I'm interested in raising that standard, you know what I mean? And so like, but I really think that it's a question for us as parents, right? Because I think that the parents make the demands that the school system must then answer to. And so as long as we aren't asking for it, as long as we're not saying, no, 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 you need a vegan meal. I'm so sorry. I'm not sending my child a vegan meal every day. My child should be able to get something there every day. Do we know that we can demand that? And do our schools have the ability to accommodate that? Do they have the personnel who have the knowledge? Do they have the facilities to accommodate? These are all things that the answer is no. My daughter's school doesn't have a cafeteria staff, right? So when we think about school, like the food is brought in, heated, and distributed. There is no culture of the food. There's no smelling of the food. They don't go into a cafeteria to share it. And so I really think it's a question of us as parents going in and making those demands and saying, this is available. This is what my child needs. And just like for any other accommodation, you have to meet that need.
I love that. So that I kind of want to segue into the supper club.
Yes.
This baby that you put together, and that we worked
We.
on as a team. Well, but we know that this is,
Yeah.
you birthed it, right? So let's talk about the supper club because that's kind of what led us into this initiative. So if you can give the people a quick summary of what the supper club is and the idea behind that, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, so the supper club idea is simple. We're getting back to grassroots, bare bone community meals, right? What does it look like when the community comes together to eat? One, we take responsibility for making sure that the community eats, right? So when the community doesn't gather together, there is no eye looking around to see who hasn't eaten. When there is a gathering place for people to eat, you notice who's missing. You notice who's not there. You notice who's working late. There's this accountability that we all take on. I think it's super important when we talk about raising our standard of food. I also think the supper club is a really good opportunity for us to um, build community. And we know that food is the foundation of our communal building. Whenever we need to get something done, we're going to have a meal either on the front, the back, or in the middle. Like it's going to need to be in there. And so when we want to have hard conversations about legislation, when we want to have hard conversations about jobs, we want to have hard conversations about housing, food should be a central part of that. I think that the supper club is a great idea. One, because it's like a play on this ritzy idea, but also because everyone needs supper. Like no one should be going to bed without a meal. And so when we look at it as a communal idea, we're all taking responsibility for that, but it creates an actual place for us to gather and commune around these ideas that are larger than just food, like legislation, like housing, like employment, like education, all of those things. And so the supper club is really an incubator to really bring our community back together because we know that we gather with food. We know that we gather with food. It's also an opportunity to share recipes, share produce distribution. Just looking at bringing the culture of community food into one place. And I, if and I'm curious to know because I know that Chantel, you are a part of like a religious community, and I know that a lot of churches do have something like this, where like there may be a weekly meal of some kind, where you see folks gathering and you see real community building. You see the children kind of linking on. You make friends with other parents. Do you see other spaces like that outside? Because I don't see other spaces where we can gather as families, where it's safe to bring your child, share a meal, and everyone can kind of get something from it. That's the idea of it and all. But kind of taking out the religious aspect and saying everyone is welcome. Everyone needs to eat. This is a space for all.
I love that. I love that. And you kind of answered my next question. It was going to be basically, how do you see communal dining moving our community forward, specifically marginalized community? Like, what's your vision for how this communal dining experience that we are trying to curate with the Supper Club, how that's going to advance our communities?
Um, I think that right now, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think that we eat in private right now. And when you eat in private, there's just no accountability, right? So like when I'm tired and I'm having like a rough week, my child might eat pizza several times. You know what I'm saying? And there is no one who's looking to be like, Sarah, girl, do you need me to make you a meal, girl? You having a week? But it's like bringing that out into the open so that we can all see it. It's the same thing with if we're lacking resources. When we're having when the community eats together, you notice that oh, you only have rice today? You only have lentils today? Let me hook you. I got some potatoes. Let me. It's bringing it back and creating this communal responsibility for feeding each other. And I think that that communal responsibility is something that we lack as a community at whole.
Well, yeah.
Also, I think that when we talk about communal dining, we organize a cohort that can mobilize in other ways around food access. So, like when we have a group of 100 or 200 people who gather, maybe not all at the same time, but who are all interested and committed to the same idea, these are the foundations of a grocery store co-op, right? Like that's how Seven Onda was established. Like this is how we begin to build that. We build community around trusting each other around food, and sharing the responsibility of feeding each other. And I think that that can really raise our social standing around food in general. So that's the goal. The goal is to share that responsibility to make sure everyone is eating, but then to kind of change the landscape of our food access in general.
I love that. So that when you were talking about access, right? I think that's a very important barrier. It really is a barrier, specifically in South Fulton, the area that we live in, we reside in the area that we serve. So, what do you think we can do, even at just a basic level? And this could be us as an organization or as individuals, whatever feels right in your spirit. But what do you think we can do to kind of help improve the access to healthier foods in this area, and also education? Because a lot of times I think it's the education piece as well. Again, when you mentioned earlier that when you all were doing this in DC, that you noticed that the families, they kind of slept on the produce and kind of took the things that they felt were easier to prepare. So I guess it's a two-part question. What can we do as individuals to kind of assist with the educational piece of food access, and even just rectifying the issue? And is it even ours to rectify? So I'll stop there. And
Yeah, I think that's a great question for Sardis. I think I think that yes, this is our problem. That no one else is going to answer it for us. When we talk about the nourishment of our community and the nourishment of our children, if it is a problem, it is for us to solve. No one else is going to solve it. I think that um I think that there is a gap in our conversation about it. I don't hear us talking about like the three of us, we have conversations often about like having to travel to Midtown to get to the Trader Joe's or to Whole Foods or something like that. I don't hear that conversation in other groups that I'm in. When I'm in the PTA group chat I'm in, everybody's cool going to Publix. In these other groups that I'm in, we are we're good with where we are. It's kind of how it feels. And I think it's really important that we raise the parental education around what we deserve as a people, right? So, like, we deserve to be able to go and buy bulk. You should be able to do that. You shouldn't have to buy prepackaged things. If everything in the Publix is prepackaged, that this is communicating something to you. When you go to Whole Foods, you can buy 30 cents of quinoa. That is a game changer in marginalized areas, period, But when you like it, so it changes our ability to interact with things, to try different things. And so I think that it's a real conversation around us as parents making demands. But I also think that there is a conversation around the narrative of food that we have in our communities and how that has evolved over time. And when we think about gardening, and in the work that I've done in gardening, some folks kind of, aren't there. They are beyond that. That we're not doing that. You know what I'm saying? I like going to the Publix. You know what I'm saying? That's my luxury, you know? And so what do we do with that? What do we do with um the cultural dynamics that we really feel as we try to be upwardly mobile, and as we increase our economic mobility, but also staying close to our roots, where our grandparents always had a garden. Our grandparents always had a garden. When we think about the history of Atlanta, Atlanta was a transient city from all of the rural areas around it. You know what I mean? The Black folks coming into Atlanta were traveling. There were few places that you could come in here to buy food or sit down and eat. You brought your food with you. And so, like, when we think about the history of food in this place, it's important that we unpack some of our own stuff and be willing to bring some of our ancestral heritage along with us. And so I think it's important that we're able to afford whatever we want. I like going to Publix. I like going and running into Publix and getting my kombucha. I like it. But I also do, when I only have $10 in my pocket, I want to be able to go and buy bulk. I want to be able to just buy half a pound of rice. And because that's all I can afford. You know what I mean? And not have to spend and just kind of like having that option. I think that we need to know that we deserve that option. We deserve access to both. As we move up in our society, we hold on to what we have as we acquire new things.
Mhm. I love that. I love that.
So,
So
oh, you
go
go,
ahead.
go ahead, Tanya. I'm sorry.
So I think, that was so rich and so important. You kind of hit on a couple of the questions that we had really in speaking. So, but I'm gonna move into more of the food education empowerment piece. Just asking questions around that. So, um, what are some common misconceptions that families have about healthy eating, and how can we shift those mindsets? What does that look like?
There are so many. The first one that comes to mind is that it is expensive to eat healthy. I think it is expensive to eat healthy when you have limited spaces to buy healthy food, when you grow food, and when you have access to options. It is not expensive to eat healthy. It is actually significantly cheaper. Um, there's also the misconception that healthy food is not comfort food, right? When we think about the foods that feed our souls. Societally, those things are not considered healthy. And I think it's really important that we step away from that. When Chantel is talking about those oxtails with butter beans and cabbage, that is a round meal. Okay, you have touched every food group. I'm not playing. You have. And so, like when we talk about our food that is culturally rich to us, it is whole. It is fine just as it is. We don't need to alter it. It's just a question of sourcing. It's a question of availability. Um, what else? I think that we've allowed folks to convince us what our children will and won't eat. Um, and so we kind of get into like, okay, for instance, the way that we introduce food, and when I had some, I was introduced to like baby-led weaning, where I kind of allowed her to kind of explore food herself. My mother, when she was introducing food to me, it was baby food. I was given mashed food, right? And so this was like a puree. And so when we think about how our children are introduced to textures and flavors, is it culturally responsive to who we are, right? So if you start your baby off with carrots, just plain carrots, and no seasoning, like your baby, that's not what your baby appreciates. You know what and I'm not joking. I'm not even playing. Like your baby has been feeding off of your breast milk where there is garlic and onion and all of these other things.
Paprika,
And then you
yes.
bring this and then you give your baby like, and it's like, what is this? We really have to bring our culture back into our food and in the early introductions to it with our children. And that is with texture, that is with flavor, that is with spice. Our children eat spicy food. What you mean? They eat Takis. Don't tell me kids don't eat spicy food when if your babies eat Takis. They're fine. Our babies like crunch. Our babies like variety. It's our responsibility to introduce it to them at an early age so that they can kind of explore that range. Everyone isn't going to like everything, but it's important that we give them the opportunity to see what they like, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you, what you just mentioned, as it relates to what it sounds like is what I'm hearing was parent engagement. That's kind of that would be my next question. Like How do you feel like we can engage parents in the conversation about food and the very same things you were talking about in a meaningful and obviously respectful way? What do you think that looks like, especially from your experience?
I think that honestly, parents that look like us and parents that live like us, um, are in a lot of ways disconnected from what's happening with school food in general. And so I think that when we invite our parents back in, there is a vast difference from what you were served as a child versus what your child is being served now. It's easy, like when we send our children to school, you kind of have this trope in the back of your mind of what that looks like. Pizza Fridays, they're gonna have some fish sticks, they're gonna have you because you went through the process yourself. Um, but we don't really understand how our food system has been institutionalized, how our food system has been commercialized, and what that looks like on the plate for our children right now. It's not what you remember. And so I think that the first part is like, go, when we talk about parent engagement, go have lunch with your baby in that cafeteria. Go have lunch with your child in that cafeteria. See how it smells. See what it's looking like. See the portions. It really gives you context for the care that is given to feeding your children in the school. I think it's a really important part. And then I also think that when we talk about that prolonged story, it's also just important to think about not just our generation, but like what did it look like for our parents to have how did they feed themselves and our grandparents? Let's look at how this thing is kind of the
Shifting,
trajectory of it.
yes.
Yeah, let's really look at this because you can really see what's happening. You can see um, the 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 shifts that have been made. You can see the way things have been cheapened is the best way I can say it.
The cheapening
And
of it
so
all,
it's
yes.
yes. And so like let's really get in there. Let's not make assumptions. Let's not make assumptions about what that looks like. Um, I know that for a lot of South Fulton, our children get free and reduced meals, right? And so like there isn't even a conscious need to like pay for it necessarily for a lot of us. Like you just send the child to school and you know that they're gonna have something. And we need to have a bit more care and making sure that we go in and knowing what exactly that looks like, what does that smell like, and what does that taste like.
So what I'm hearing you say is parental involvement. Like you get in there,
Yes.
you sit in the cafeteria with your baby and have the experience firsthand so that you can speak to it and
Yeah.
understand what they're going through or what they're experiencing on a day to day. I know that with my son came home and he was like, Mom, this little girl, well, I guess a girl in his class, she said I was privileged because you pack my lunch every day. And I was like, shout out to her. Because indeed you actually are. I didn't even consider that. I just naturally pack lunch for my kids because I know it's some foolishness at the schools. So and I would like everybody can't do that. Everybody doesn't have the capacity to do that. So you feel bad for the children who don't have that option and who just choose not to eat and they go throughout the day hungry and they're not their best selves. Because I know when I'm hungry, y'all know, a whole nother beast, and that's probably a lot of people. But anyway, I digress. I want to ask. So my next question, real quick, would be: it's kind of a tag on to what I just asked you about the engagement. Now we're talking family engagement. So how, and especially from your experience with building gardens at elementary schools, how would you or what are ways that you would suggest to get parents and children involved in gardening, and what does that look like from your perspective?
Um, so I think growing food is the best place to start with gardening, right? So when we think about gardens, before I taught garden science and like agriculture, I thought of gardens as flowers, right? I thought of it as shrubbery, like gardens. Like you go to the botanical garden, it's not you're not going there to eat. It's something to look at. You might smell a couple things. Um, Understanding that the garden is a place to go to eat, a garden is a place to go to nourish ourselves. I think is a really great place to start. We don't all have access to garden space though. And so I have done projects where we just send folks home with a pot. You can grow lettuce in a pot in your windowsill. You can grow cucumbers and peppers and tomatoes in a pot in your windowsill. And the relationship you have with that plant is different. When you are nurturing a thing and then you eat that thing, there's a different care that has gone through it. And so the way you present it to your family is different. The way your child interacts with it is different. When I'm growing stuff, my child is constantly measuring it. She's like, I need 2 more inches for you to pick that, right? So she's constantly like watching it for ample ripeness, you know? And so it changes the way we interact with our food when we see the actual system that it takes for it to get to our plate. And so I think that it's a huge part. But it's like it's not just the garden is wherever you are, wherever there's dirt. There's a his name, I can't think of his name right now, but he started a program out in California. They were renegade gardeners, where he started basically growing edible gardens in the medians of the highways and in the hood. So like there's green space all over. We have dirt and air and water everywhere. There is genuinely no logical reason for anyone to be hungry. Like in real life, it's not, there's no logical reason. And so when we start to reclaim these spaces and we say, I'm growing food wherever I am. If I got a patio, if I got a window, there's a woman on Instagram who is living in her car right now, and on her dashboard, she has her seedlings. There's a commitment to growing our food, you know? And I think that we really have to reclaim that no matter where we are, no matter what space we have. But then when we think about gardens as a whole, the garden is a place to commune. The garden is a place to commune. Because I started gardening when Song was young, she understands it as a safe space. And I was actually writing about this recently, how the garden is a really interesting intergenerational space because it's a safe space for children to interact with adults and elders without real structure. And for me as a child, that wasn't always a safe space, you know, to be in scenarios with adults without structure may not always end well. And so when you create these really safe spaces where we're all intentionally feeding into the same thing, our children understand community and again, trust in a different way. And so I think that we grow wherever we are, but we also understand that we have to honor the garden space. When we have a garden, that space has to be honored for sure.
I love all of this because not just, and I agree on so many things with everything, honestly. But it's like when you have a garden, when you grow your own food, you can feed yourself. You don't that at that point, whatever the government or whoever is doing whatever they're doing, you can still feed yourself.
Oh, I think we might have lost her.
Oh,
Come back. Oh, here she is.
okay. No, I said the government, baby, and they got mad, didn't they? Ooh, that's something different. That took away my little background and everything. Well, now you can see my earrings. But anyway, but the government, I'm gonna say it again. They can't take away your food when you're growing it yourself in your own space. And you can also not just have that as being edible. We doing it again, y'all playing. Anyway, we're doing, you can feed yourself, but you can also heal yourself because there's herbs, there's all kinds of things that you can make from the herbs that are in the garden. There's tinctures and all kinds of different things. So you can heal yourself, you can heal other people, you can feed yourself, you can cleanse yourself because there's things that you can grow to do that. And so I think that this is a beautiful thing to have this space to be able to do that. So yeah, this is big work. This is why it's important for us to learn about those things. So I absolutely agree with you. How can we, moving into that, how can we assure that the changes we inspire around access, our food access, are lasting and community led? Uh-oh. Can, is it me?
No, no, no. Did you hear the question, Sarah? You might have to repeat it, Tanya.
Okay.
Oh, you're
Can
muted, Sarah.
wait, I don't know if she's muted.
Can you repeat it for me, Tanya? I didn't hear the question.
Okay. So how can we ensure that the changes we inspire around food access are lasting and community led?
Um, I think the simplest answer is that we instill it in our children. Our children they're our loudest advertisers, but they also continue the legacy that we lead. And they evolve on it, they grow upon it. And so when we instill these ideas in them, when they're comfortable in it, when they fully understand these ideas and take responsibility for them,
Mhm.
these ideas grow. It's kind of like me. Like, I watched my mother have a co-op off her carport. From that, I have a different idea around food, and now I have my own approach to it. And so when we provide our children with the access to kind of witness these things, they'll take it where it needs to go. Dr. Willie says the community has everything it needs to survive. And so when we give our children what it needs, they'll take it where it needs to go. They'll make it work. I think that our children are a huge part of it. I also think that our recipes are a huge part of it. Sometimes on social media, we like to say we're losing the recipes, and we are losing some recipes. But in real life, we have to maintain our recipes, you guys, our medicinal recipes. The way your grandma made that chicken soup, it's important. It is important. The order in which she did it, the amount of salt she did it, everything has a reason when we talk about what we're putting into our bodies, and it's worth preserving. And so I think that teaching our children, for sure, but as adults, let's go back and reclaim some of those things that our elders have that we might have wanted to kind of alter and shift. And go, girl, go back to that original recipe and see what it do for you.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So I had a quick.
Okay, so
Oh,
go, you go.
oh yeah. I'm sorry. I just had one more quick question because she mentioned schools again. So I just wanted to get your vision on what a robust popped in my mind, but what a good school nutrition program looks like. What is a good school nutrition program? Your vision for a good or great, let's say great school nutrition program.
Definitely. So let's start at the bare basics. Our children are in school for at least 8 hours. They're learning, they're doing physical activity. They should be fed 3 to 4 times during that time. That, like, truly, they should be given 2 meals and 2 snacks during that time. For the amount of energy that they're putting out, they need to be fed a whole lot more. So when we start with just capacity, our children need more food in our school nutrition system. Um, there also needs to be access to cultural accommodations. We have children who grow up like, here in Atlanta, we have a huge Hispanic population in certain communities. How do we really bring their cultural food into the classroom in a real way that makes them feel respected and seen? It's interesting when we're bringing children out of their homes, and they have to code switch on their food, they code switch on their language, they code switch on the way that they dress. We're really asking people to do some real shifting. And so I think it's a conversation about um, meeting folks where they are and understanding what we really need. Our children need more food. We need to, like, really look at calorie count, portion size. How much do these children need to maintain energy for 8 hours and not have an attitude and not get hangry and not get tired? Well, how do we feed our children similar food that their mother and, like, their comfort foods that they eat at home? And then how do we accommodate for our children who have dietary restrictions? So children who look like us, we don't do very much dairy, right? Like, dairy has a very interesting effect on the bodies of people who look like us. And so when we think about the nationwide dairy contracts that exist in public schools and how our children are given milk at breakfast and lunch through middle school, why is that? And what should be done differently? Those kinds of things I think are just fundamental questions. It's not hard to provide our children with smoothies and fresh juice. It's just not. It's just not hard. It just requires some level of intention. I think it's intentionality. I think it's cultural relevance, and I think it's about looking at our children as real people and understanding, what do you need. Like, it's not just about checking off the box, but, like, what do you really need to be happy and be able to do what I'm asking you to do while you're here.
Love that. Take it away, Tanya. I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. So nice question. What advice would you give to other parents or educators who want to start a similar initiative in their own communities?
Make demands. We got to make demands. Last week I would have said that um, the school has the funding to provide this, right? But the Trump's big, beautiful ass bill just passed. And so that has changed everything. And so when we talk about what our schools are providing our children, we need to understand that trajectory is headed down. We have to make demands. You need to be making real demands. I want almond milk for my child. I want oat milk for my child. That is something you should be able to accommodate. I want two whole fruits and vegetables on the plate every day. That is something you should be able to accommodate. Um, I think it's about demanding what we want. I think that's really the basis of it. Is like coming in and saying, "This is what we deserve." I'm willing. What do you want? You want? Do I need to do a couple hours in the garden? I'm willing. You know, we can. What is necessary to really make sure that this is seen through. And it's about us reclaiming part of that responsibility because we have gotten very comfortable with sending our children to school and expecting them to come home fed. And so we have to understand that in the same way that we can't really trust a society to do other things, we still need to keep our foot on that one. You know, we need to make sure that we are making sure that our children are well fed. When they come home, what did you eat? How much of it did you eat? How much did you throw away? Making sure that we're supplementing whatever they ate at school with what we're eating, with what we're feeding them at home. Really making it a holistic experience. Because nutrition is where our children's wellness starts. It is like it's. I'm talking about mental wellness, physicality, all of it. It starts with our nutrition, and I think in a lot of ways we get played out of what is ours, you know. And so we got to take that responsibility back.
Absolutely. And I just want to interject really quickly to share with our listeners. So, what one of the things that we did with our lovely partners at the Georgia Coalition for Education Justice, we did a legislative analysis on two bills. And one of those bills is Senate Bill 217, and it is called the Healthy Start bill. Now, it's currently, last we checked, it was currently read by the Senate and referred. So this is a bill, of course, in Georgia, and in essence, it's the whole purpose is to maximize the opportunity for resource-limited children in Georgia to receive meals and streamlines the process for financially vulnerable families in a discrete manner. And one of the things in the bill, they basically are wanting to encourage, you know, schools to have contracts with local farms. So one of the things that we suggested in our legislative analysis was, hey, rather than encourage, why not incentivize? Because Georgia is so rich and it's an agriculturally rich state, and why are we not? Why is the farm to school model where we have, you know, these all these farms here? Why is that not a standard in our schools that our children aren't getting more fresh produce when we live in such an agriculturally rich state? So for our listeners, if you have not looked into SB 217, feel free to give it a look. And also and that you can do that at, I believe it's www.legis.ga.gov, and you should be able to search SB 217. And one of the, well, there's several sponsors, but I'll just name the first one that should come up, and it's Nabila, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Islam Parks, and then Harold Jones is one as well, and there's several of on this bill. So we strongly encourage you to look into it, and you can call up whoever your senators are, or whoever is in the House of Representatives, whoever your person is, your contact person is, and you can just, you know, encourage to say, hey, we really like this bill, and or we have this suggestion or edit that we want to make to the bill, whatever that looks like. But we just want to encourage you all to look into it, because this is a great bill that well, we found it to be a great bill that would be beneficial to our children. So yeah, I just wanted to give that plug there. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. No, that's such an important point. That's such an important point. And when I mentioned the big beautiful bill, it just wiped out SNAP Ed, which allowed the federal government to supplement school food for schools where the majority of the students receive SNAP benefits in home. And so that no longer exists. And also that the federal farm to school program that we were just discussing just got wiped out, right? Like that it no longer exists on the federal level anymore. And so as of today. And so these are now questions that we bring to our local legislators. It's not a question of going to DC anymore. Like in our last episode, when we were talking with Tanya Winters about going up to the state house, those are the people we need to discuss this with now. They have the full ability to make these decisions. And so it's actually closer for us, you know? It's not far off. We got to go out, we got to reach it, but we also have to understand that they are actively trying to take this stuff from us.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for that. Mm-mm-mm-mm. So did you want to ask an additional question, Tanya?
No, no, no. I
Okay.
just think that this has been a great, great, great dialogue. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh,
Um,
Thank y'all.
absolutely.
yeah, this is beautiful. This is rich, and I'm hoping that we can navigate our way around this BS bill that has been passed and is is evil. Let's just call a thing, um, and meant to try to destroy. I feel like we are thrivers. I won't even call us survivors. We'll get through this. We'll figure out what it is that we need to do, but we need to incorporate community like you've been talking about, and bring that back, incorporate feeding ourselves and growing our own things and learning about that and teaching each other those things. There are some partnering organizations that we were trying to partner with Ubuntu, and hopefully that can be something that will come to fruition. Um, but a wonderful farmer friend of mine, Tanisio Sinama, I hope I'm not slaughtering his last name, Yanama, I think is how you say it. He is a Black farmer, um, and he's with Arts Exchange and another organization as well now. But they have a community garden that they will allow you to actually be a part of. There's a small, very nominal fee, and I think it's annual. You get to go to classes and all kinds of other things that you get to learn about gardening, and you'll get your own kind of like a space. What is it called? A little
Plot, a
round
Plot.
plot. Mm-hmm.
little plot. You get a little plot of your own space to be able to plant what you want to plant. They will help you with that if you need to, and they keep it there at that location. However, you come and work it, you get your hands dirty, you can bring your children. It's a whole thing. And so I encourage us to learn, reach out, find the people in your community that do know how to do those things, get them to teach you. And 9 times out of 10, they would love to show you how to do those things. They want more of us to know how to do those things. And so I recently just got a peach tree planted in my backyard for free 99. Within the South Fulton community, they are doing that. It is called, what did I call it? Eco Action
Eco
is what
action. Mm-hmm.
Eco Action is Atlanta is an organization. I wanted to shout them out because that was a beautiful thing that was just recently provided to me. Got a whole free peach tree planted that I get to take care of, nurture, and have fruit from in the coming years. And so that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So there are people that are out here doing good work. There are ways for you to get your hands dirty, get involved, make sure that you're fed, and when you can feed yourself, can't nobody take nothing from you, baby. So just
Indeed.
always keep that in mind. Thank you again so much, Sarah, for
Thank
joining
you.
us and talking so in depth about this wonderful, wonderful thing. So,
Absolutely. And I just want to plug one more organization. So, One Talent, they are a partnering organization with Ubuntu and they have a garden. So, they're located, it's Club E, where the garden is. It's like a side portion of the building, but beautiful garden. And they actually allow the girls that are in the One Talent program, the young girls, to go in and plant. And they have ceremonies in the garden, just a really neat space. So, just wanted to share that with the public as well. One Talent is a great group that actually helps the children, garden and plant and things of that nature, and to come back and monitor to see what they've grown. So really, really neat stuff. So there's a lot of people doing the work in the community, and we just have to connect and get stronger. So yeah, thank you again, Sarah. We
yes.
appreciate
Thank you
you.
guys. Great conversation. Thank you.
All right, listeners, thank you for hanging with us, and we appreciate y'all so much. And if you want to, Sarah, how can people stay connected with you about the Supper Club and your nutrition initiatives?
Um, so I do have an Instagram, but I'm not super active on it. I actually post most regularly on my Substack. I have a Substack. It's called The Lady Who Ate Atlanta. I talk a lot about nutrition, food access, motherhood, those kinds of things. And so that's where you can find me usually weekly.
Okay.
Um, but outside, I'm outside. I'm in the garden.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank y'all.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.